A teacher at Reagan High School in Austin has been charged with enticing a 14-year-old. Police in Lago Vista say he met the girl on Facebook and then picked her up at her home without her parents knowing about it. KXAN's Chris Sadeghi spoke to the district today about how they're handling this case.
The teacher resigned once the district learned about the investigation. The charge says he met up with a 14-year-old in Lago Vista, not one of his students, but Austin ISD wants parents to talk to their kids. First-year teacher John Baird is accused of meeting the teenager on Facebook, then arranging to meet in person on December 19th. Her parents called police when she disappeared that day, and an arrest warrant said when she returned hours later, the girl told her mom she went back to the man's apartment to watch movies and play video games. But an examination was done, and the warrant said Baird did commit sexual assault. That possible charge must come from Austin police, who are also investigating. But for now, the only charge is from Lago Vista for enticing a child.
Well, hello again, friends. I know it has been a while. If you usually watch my videos for deep dives like JRC3 or Latiti or Mayo, this will be a video you enjoy. I've been asked before about the internet figures I do videos about. How do you find these people? And the answer is always the same. I don't. They find me. Apparently, I have a strange, unnatural attraction to psychopaths and unsavory individuals. Like a magnet for terrible. And today will be one of those tales. But before you can learn all about Austin, Texas activist, citizen journalist, mass shooter sympathizer, and all-around unflushed gas station turd, Laura Izaguirre, I refuse to learn how to pronounce her funky-ass name, you have to know about Austin, Texas sex offender for the crime of enticement by exposure upon a 14-year-old girl, former math teacher, John Lee Baird. You may be thinking, if this is a story about someone named Laura Izaguirre, why are we hearing about the case of some sex offender from the 20-teens in Austin? Well, interesting story, friendo. I knew this guy. Kinda. Back then, he would appear on a live stream called The Cunt Stream on Friday nights I would appear on from time to time, and I ran into him there. As well as him appearing in my DMs once when an old face from my cow videos you might recognize, Scooby331, enlisted John Lee Baird under his assumed alias at the time, Tyro, to come to his defense. That's right. The Scooby saga continues. You can see the details of this in part 4 of the Scooby331 saga. Ha, I don't care. Like I said, he was using his current alias online at the time, Tyro Inchoate. And all I really knew about him was he was in his middle age somewhere. He was dating a transgender European girl named Ko-Fi. He claimed to be autistic and he was really into anime and card games. Yeah, no red flags there, I know. He was very right-wing as well, calling Democrats Democrats. And saying he was fucking traps to own the libs. Yeah, he was a strange guy to say the least. And everything I just told you about him will be relevant soon, by the way. I'm not just picking on it. Even with my limited interaction with Tyro, he was always way too weird for my taste. And I didn't even know the worst things about him, like the story we're here to tell today. It's important you know that I didn't really know this guy. Not just because I disavow him as a registered sex offender in Texas, but also because when we get to Tyro's revenge via Laura Izaguirre, it may seem like this is really fucking personal to either him or her. And you should know that I barely knew this pervert, and I have never once spoken to Laura Izaguirre. No idea who this alleged woman is. Tyro is a guy I streamed with 3 or 4 times for maybe an hour on some Friday night stream in the 20-teens. And who the fuck knows what hole Laura crawled out of. I believe in order to understand the opinions and writings of Laura Izaguirre, which can be traced back to 2020 online, you have to know more about the person I believe she's writing about in many cases. And the person I believe Laura wrote a libelous and defaming blog in defense of under the pseudonym Posey Bindell. This is an amalgamation of two feminist TERFs that Laura writes about and hates, even calling for violence upon, as you can see here. Trust me, we'll get there. We're going to take our time. Now just sit back, grab a cup of coffee, and enjoy the story, or shall I say the stories, of John Lee Baird, otherwise known on the internet from 2017 to 2022 as Tyro Inchoate, Tyro Moonhopper, and Return of the Grasshopper, the registered sex offender who brought me against my will into proximity with Austin, Texas activist and self-described citizen journalist, public figure, Laura Izaguirre. The Case of John Lee Baird. The story of John Lee Baird begins back in 2014. A simpler time. Gone Girl and 22 Jump Street were tearing up the box office. Maroon 5 was tearing up the charts. And John Lee Baird was about to tear up his entire life. Baird was a mid-30s anime and tabletop gaming enthusiast, active in both local communities, frequently going to anime conventions and tabletop gaming competitions in the area. He was also a math teacher at Reagan High School in Austin, Texas, and had big dreams of developing programs to help kids learn arithmetic. A seemingly nice, yet mildly naive, quiet young man, ready to get his career started with big aspirations. A shy, trusting man who was reported to be good-natured and easygoing. That was, until he ended up in, shall we call it, an illegal entanglement. According to news reports, John Lee Baird had been communicating with a 14-year-old girl online for over a month, named in the court paperwork as Becky Rogers, a pseudonym to protect the identity of the underage victim. Allegedly, on December the 19th, 2014, Baird picked up Becky from her high school at early dismissal time around noon. Then he took her back to his apartment for some movies and video games. Netflix and chill action. And at John Lee Baird's Austin, Texas apartment, allegedly, something inappropriate happened. The papers I have access to don't tell me exactly what took place. But when Becky Rogers returned home, her mother was curious why her 14-year-old was missing for the last 6 hours, disappearing from her high school campus she was attending during her first semester as a freshman in high school. Now, the reports don't detail what Becky said. However, after this conversation, Becky's mother took her in for a SANE exam. SANE stands for a Sexual Assault Nurse Examiner, the rape kit. So let's just throw the score up on the scoreboard of reality real quick. A 14-year-old gets picked up from her school at noon by this Austin math teacher. And to be clear, he worked at a different school. She was not his student. And that doesn't make it much better, but it gives him a little plausible deniability, I guess. He takes her to his apartment for 6 hours. She gets home. She is confronted by her mother. We don't know what she tells her mother, but as a result of what she tells her mother, Mom demands a rape kit be done. So it is not absurd, based on the mother's reaction, to assume the child had admitted some manner of sexual activity or contact with Baird. I dare say every parent of a teenage daughter has had to go hunt her down because she's gone missing with her friends at some point, and very few of us have had to order a rape kit. Meanwhile, John Lee Baird, unaware this was happening, was posting on his blog. Yes, keep in mind, friends, John Lee Baird has had a years-long history with blogging out his feelings. Well after the time when blogging was appropriate. This is relevant, as it's a trait he shares with Laura Izaguirre, citizen journalist and public figure in Austin, Texas. Blogging is not a very common pastime on this side of the internet, or in general, as it's not 2002 anymore. Friday, December 19th, 2014. Tidbits. Whatever two consenting cedar trees want to do in the privacy of their own bedroom is fine with me. But when they launch their reproductive materials into the air and all over my face, I object. Baird was an eccentric sort, writing sexual poetry about tree ejaculation the same day he would be accused of sexual assault on a child. But hey, that doesn't prove anything other than Baird writes perverted bad poetry, right? Perhaps it was just epic bad timing. Detective Frank Alaka was assigned to the case and received the results of the SANE exam from the victim's mother. On December the 23rd, 2014, an interview with both the parent and the victim were conducted, resulting in the victim breaking down emotionally, becoming fearful and crying. The 14-year-old girl then told them how she met the 33-year-old teacher on the social media site Facebook, and after sending each other private messages for approximately 1 month, he had gotten her to agree to meet with him. That is when they arranged to meet at noon at the victim's school at her early release time. The results of the SANE exam are sealed to protect the privacy of the victim, so I cannot tell you the results of it. But I can tell you that Baird was subsequently charged with 7 counts of sexual assault on a child, including very specific charges about touching her sexual organs, that he engaged in sexual contact with Becky Rogers by specifically touching her breasts and specifically touching her sexual organs with his sexual organs. Now, I don't want to go speculating or making any wild assumptions here, but I think it would be reasonable to assume that at least some of these things came up in the interview and were validated by the exam for these very specific charges to be leveled against John Lee Baird. Baird then resigned from his teaching position at Reagan High School and began the grueling process of dealing with these charges. The strange thing is, most of the charges did not stick in the end. I don't have the FOIA information on this case at the time of writing this, so feel free to speculate. But in the end, Baird only pled and was found guilty of felony enticement by exposure, and was allowed to remain free on 10 years deferred adjudication probation. Now, lots of people have forwarded theories about liberal judges giving him a break, or his parents being rich and hiring great lawyers, and that's why all the charges were dropped. But today, I think I might be able to give a different explanation. Will my theory exonerate Baird? No. But we're not here to speculate at this time. The bottom line is, provided he didn't screw up, he would be off of the sex offender registry within 10 years, and this would not be a conviction on his record. Even at this time, technically speaking, Baird has not been convicted of this crime that he pled guilty to. He has until the end of his probationary period to prove he can be a good boy. So that should be the end of the story, right? Well, not quite. Mr. Baird seemingly made some not-so-amazing choices with his newfound freedom. With no time to spare, John Lee Baird had allegedly found himself in another, less than wholesome, creepy situation. Well, maybe I shouldn't say just a creepy situation. He had laser-targeted the creepiest thing he could have been doing short of reoffending in the exact same way. In 2017, only 2 years later, Baird was once again brought to court for violating his probation. Failure to avoid the use of alcohol, failure to avoid child safety zones, having contact with minor children without a chaperone, failing to abide by his internet restrictions by establishing online aliases, not avoiding obscene sexual materials. Mr. Baird had once again been accused of being a very, very naughty boy. But what was the allegation that would reveal all of this about him? What happened here? Well, part of it might have had to do with his recent employment choices and relationship. Reportedly, these emails were sent to his probation officer, alerting them that John Lee Baird had been identified, spotted, photographed, and recorded at the Bell County Comic-Con. And what was he doing there? It was confirmed he was working as a photographer for a company called Glitter Princess Entertainment. Glitter Princess Entertainment of Austin, Texas, was a company that offered princess parties and magical moments for little girls aged 2 through 18. The exact same age demographic I dare say Baird should stay away from because he pled guilty to enticement by exposure of a 14-year-old. Now, let me explain. It's not as bad as you think. Many of you don't know what a princess party is. First, I pity you. Your childhood was crap. What happens at a princess party is they come into your home dressed as Belle or Elsa or whoever your little girl's favorite princess is, and they make the kiddos happy. It's adorable. My mission is not to kneecap the princess party industry. I want to be clear about that. Unfortunately, in this case, also reportedly coming with the princesses for your child's special magical moment is a registered sex offender with a history with underage girls. But don't worry, he will just be photographing your children and presumably have access to the photos, be able to keep them, edit them, do whatever he wants with them. Nothing weird about a man fresh on the sex offender reg choosing to take photos and be in possession of said photos of exclusively underage girls. Don't be a bigot. Laura might write a blog full of completely made-up libel about you. The company also did an appearance or booth or maybe just walking around for free publicity in costume and begging for photo money event at the Bell County Comic-Con, where Baird's alleged girlfriend at the time was one of the glitter princesses. It is unclear whether or not the organization knew Baird was a registered sex offender, but what is clear are the allegations that the company owner attempted to sweep this under the rug and blame the victim. It may be possible that Baird hid this fact from his girlfriend and the owner, or perhaps him and the girlfriend shared the secret. Maybe the thought process was that Baird was totally innocent, and therefore there was no real harm in this terrible staffing choice. But whatever happened there, a teacher at a high school pled guilty to enticement by exposure of a girl the same age as the students that he was teaching. Gets 10 years deferred, basically probation and a chance to stay out of jail as an underage sex offender and have it all wiped clean after a decade. And then he makes the amazing, galaxy-brained, Einstein-level choice of going to work as a photographer for a little girl's princess party company. I dare say that sounds pretty fucking creepy. For many people, it completely puts to bed the question of whether this person had an unnatural attraction to underage girls. Many people believe that this is proof that no matter what, he's going to insist on either being around them or coming into possession of photographs of them. I don't want to condemn John Lee Baird at this time with that, but I think at the very least it looks like a bank robber who gets out on probation and is told to stay away from banks so he gets a job in a fucking bank. Except all the money in the bank is your kids, and the bank robber is a pedophile. But let us say that Baird only worked there for the Comic-Con and never went into any private citizens' homes as a sex offender to interact with their children. Let's say this was his first gig at that company, and Comic-Cons are not specifically children's events. Let's say Baird is just really, really fucking stupid on a level none of us could ever understand or sympathize with. Let's even pretend he is completely ignorant as to why, as a registered child sex offender, he should avoid situations like that as if they were the plague. Let's pretend at least one, or maybe all of those things are true. But why would I field all of these excuses for this man's behavior and choices? Because apparently the judge rejected the motion to revoke bond. And something had to happen there. Because this guy was fresh on probation, fresh on the sex offender registry, and allegedly broke a number of rules. Perhaps the theory about him having an excellent attorney is true. Perhaps they couldn't nail him because he proved the Comic-Con was not an exclusively children's event. Perhaps the judge just pitied this sap because his narrative was, "I'm just too bumbling and stupid to know better. Please don't put me in prison. I'll die." Maybe he got lucky at the anime event and he didn't photo any kids. Nobody at this time knows for sure but John Lee Baird. So that should be the end of the story, right? John Lee Baird is a man who pled guilty to enticement by exposure and then was either dumb or perverted enough to be employed at a princess party company. Then he straightened up and flew right. No, not even close. I now take you back to the beginning, when I was talking about barely knowing this guy online named Tyro. This guy that came online in 2017. Right as John Lee Baird had gotten caught with his previous online aliases, and now had seemingly created another one against the terms of his probation. Again! He even bragged about it, though nobody knew what he was referencing.
I had to nuke all of my prior accounts and aliases, but my enemies don't know who I am now, so yay.
I assume his enemies were his probation officer and the people that knew him before and figured out that he was a child sex offender working at a Comic-Con as a photographer for a princess party company. Yeah, you might want to escape those people. So what did he use his online alias to do besides be buddies with Scooby331, the worst person ever? Argue on behalf and for Lolicon, cartoon and animated child pornography, and the abolition of the sex offender registry. Ladies and gentlemen, it's finally time to hear from the man himself. In a stream from December 2022, seemingly, flagrantly breaking the law, John Lee Baird as Tyro Moonhopper.
So, in Stephen King's It, he has in there a gangbang of underage kids. Kind of creepy.
Uh-huh.
I'm not a fan of it. Would you, it's a written description though, would you count that as CP? Or simulated CP? So we've got the two questions. We'll start with the first one. Yeah, I mean, I think I outlined why I don't see the two as the same. You even could see that, yeah, that's pretty much the common argument. But, you know, you basically, I think you described it as consequentialism as the direction
Part
you're
of
going.
it.
Yeah. Now, so Japan's lolicon culture. This is one I did find an interesting source on it. Now, this is a person who I don't agree with politically at all. Her name's Naito Shizuko. Probably butchering her name. It's fine. She's a Jap. I don't care. But yeah, she is a feminist professor over in Japan. And so back in 2010, she wrote on lolicon what it meant or where it could come from. And her theory was interesting. And that is, it's not about having sex with children literally. Like lolicon, like we see, it visualizes, drawings of kids having sex. But what she points to is it's less about the fact that these are children, and it's more about that this is a rejection of modern Japanese women. That the consumers of it are men who are who do not like what Japanese women have turned into. So the idea is that basically lolicon is essentially nostalgia bait. It's featuring young girls to have nostalgia bait. It's like, hey, remember when things were simpler? Remember when a girl would actually talk to you and be kind and friendly to you? And that's kind of the basis of it.
That's right. John Lee Baird had seemingly once again violated the terms of his probation as it applies to creating fictional online aliases. And not just to get on YouTube, maybe interact a little bit in the comments. No. Baird made channels, multiple channels, did live streams, appearances, sought clout, and even debated for animated child pornography, otherwise known as lolicon, in public. Not the most low-key move for a child sex offender who just got busted working as a photographer for a children's entertainment company. But hey, don't take it from me. I didn't know the guy super well. I'll let Gilded Poo, who knew him better, take it from here.
Before I go too deeply into who this guy even is, I must stress that it's very unlikely that many of you know this John Lee Baird, especially since he makes it a habit of hiding both behind an avatar and a persona, which under most circumstances is absolutely fine, but as you'll learn today, is very far from fine in this particular case. Anyways, who is John Lee Baird? He's a former high school teacher from Texas who took part in and/or started multiple child reading programs, and was a small-time wannabe Logic Lord libertarian YouTuber whose most recent YouTube channel was named Return to Grasshopper, though he had others named Tyro Inchoate, Tyro Moonhopper, and Moonifest Destiny. Some of you, however, might only know this guy because I debated him at least twice on the subject of lolicon. He's obsessed with another YouTuber, by the way, named Aiden Paladin, and he is obsessed with Aiden Paladin in the same way at least somewhat normal people might be obsessed with Mia Khalifa or Scarlett Johansson. Sadly, however, his obsession with Aiden Paladin is by far his least fucked up obsession. Oh, and he's also way too obsessed with anime, like to the extreme of him constantly claiming that he almost exclusively only watches anime. On that note, it should also be pointed out he used to co-host an anime review channel that never quite got anywhere, called STC Watch Club, that basically nobody watched because it's exactly as cringe as it sounds. Oh yeah, and by the way, I almost forgot to mention this part, John Baird fucks kids.
So now in the time frame between 2017 and 2022, John Lee Baird functioned as Tyro around this side of the internet, before on Christmas Eve 2022, it was discovered who he really was. The thing is, when you spend all of your time arguing about the virtues of child pornography drawings and getting rid of the sex offender registry, it might make people curious if these interests might be personal or correlated.
A little more than a year ago, I had a debate with Tyro on the subject of the sex offender registry. In that debate, I became increasingly more and more suspicious that he was, in fact, on said list. And then, later on, shortly thereafter, I had it confirmed, albeit through hearsay, that Tyro was, in fact, on the sex offender registry. Unfortunately, I didn't have a name, I didn't have any links to any articles or documents, I didn't have any of that. Because of that, I chose to say nothing, because what am I gonna do? Ruin some guy's anonymity entirely? Over what? Hearsay? I can't really do that. But ultimately, the story was that he was a teacher. He had sex with a student that went to his school at some party or gathering or some shit, and that it was an accident, that he didn't know. And you know what? That shit happens all the time, so I didn't really put a whole lot of thought into it. I just thought, well, that's unfortunate. Nobody really seemed to give that much of a fuck, so I don't know, why should I care? But then a little bit more than a year later, we learned that the story we were told was fabricated by Tyro himself.
Oh, surprise! This is also the time frame that Laura Izaguirre surfaced and began blogging on the internet about sex offenders, abolishing the sex offender registry, and more. 2020. Just a note. So just to be clear, there is no question that Tyro was John Lee Baird, disgraced Austin, Texas math teacher. He admitted his identity and gave a story about just sleeping with a girl at a party he didn't know and that was not 18. Not picking up a girl from her school and taking her back to your apartment like what really happened. And in this version of the tale, he indeed allegedly slept with the 14-year-old. Now keep in mind, if he was innocent of this and never slept with a kid, why would he admit to that on the internet? Isn't that worse than just enticement by exposure? When people found the documentation about old Tyro and the story he had been running around telling didn't add up. Word got around pretty quickly about his crimes. And this was around the time frame when people told me about Tyro and what he had pled guilty to. Again, I didn't really know the guy, and at that point I hadn't spoken with him for years, so I just kind of talked about how gross he was on late night. Some of the people in the chat knew him, and talked some shit with some other people on what was in Twitter. Because what burned me the most was remembering Tyro preaching to me about being too mean to Scooby 331. I had been too unfair to Scooby 331. And now I find out he is a disgraced math teacher from my own state who had pled guilty to illegal inappropriateness with a girl the same age as of my own daughter at the time. Yeah, I talked a little shit. And meanwhile, Tyro nuked all of his accounts and faded back into wherever child sex offenders go when the internet finds out who they are and boots them out of their communities. I suspect he just has a new online alias because that is his MO. Now keep in mind, to me, that was the end of Tyro. I spent about 10 minutes on Twitter, calling him all manner of pervert and terrible person, and on late night I spent about 5 minutes roasting him for the same. Then I forgot him. He is not terribly important in my world. Just more proof about those red flags we talked about earlier, not just being a prejudice. Well, it turns out Tyro, registered sex offender John Lee Baird, was not happy with this turn of events. I imagine him crying in whatever sex offender shanty he's in, covered in his own excrement, sobbing while Lolicon plays on his phone. Tyro must have been devastated. How dare an internet community not want an alleged pedophile hanging around? Well, I suspect due to his repeated bad luck encounters with the law, Baird referred his revenge to an alleged woman named Laura Izaguirre, who took the wheel on his behalf in 2023. Laura has been blogging since 2020 about TERFs, how 97% of sex offenders are innocent, fascists, white supremacy, and how to harass, beat, and kill people who disagree with her. Basic college revolutionary, I hate my daddy, and now the world must burn shit. Derivative, wordy, childish essays bloated with wild claims and no proof. Really silly shit that, judging from the engagement on her posts, where she desperately tries to self-promote, even people who support her can't fucking stomach. Hey, let's read one now. A piece called Victims of American Injustice. 3 tales of registered sex offenders and their stories of how they're definitely not guilty. Stories that admittedly omit facts and change names to protect the innocent victims of institutional oppression. I think what she might be saying here without saying is we need to keep a pretty loose grip on reality to believe any of this crap. Stories like Alejandro's story. A queer person of color in a rural town who was just innocently tossing the cookies off in the middle of the day with children running around in the house when whoops, a little girl walks in and he forgot to cover up. Aww. Now who hasn't been in a house full of small children and thought to themselves, hey, I need to go watch adult materials and engage in self-love in an unlocked bedroom? Oh yeah, nobody fucking normal. He was then charged with raping the child, but he took a plea deal just for sexual assault on a child, with no physical evidence of any such thing ever happening. And that's because all of this was on behalf of an evil, diabolical, disgusting white girl who walked into his bedroom without permission. This child should be the one on the sex offender registry, not Alejandro. This was just a completely innocent brown queer person who was targeted by a child while he was just coincidentally masturbating to that type of porn they would masturbate to. I assume with the sound on in his room, unlocked. Nothing to see here. Nothing weird at all. Certainly not a terrible choice. Victim blaming much, Laura? Get used to it. She'll go on to tell us why you shouldn't believe white or conservative women who get raped later. Not exaggerating Now I know what you might be thinking. Doesn't our justice system have procedures in place to ensure if there is literally no physical evidence of a terrible assault, you don't get charged with it? Well, friend, Laura doesn't give us any cited evidence of these wild claims because facts had to be changed. But according to Alejandro, the real blame was that the parents coached the kid to lie and that everyone involved was part of a white supremacist community improvement group. Now I know what you might be thinking, friends. Doesn't our justice system have procedures in place to ensure if there is literally no physical evidence of a terrible violent assault that you can't get charged with it? Well, you fascist asshole, Laura doesn't have to give us any cited evidence of these wild claims because facts had to be changed. Once again, Laura doesn't provide any even redacted screenshots, proof of this group's alleged involvement with white power activities, links, or anything like that to fill in the Grand Canyon-sized gaps in logic and information provided. You just have to, believe her. All I know is, clearly, this is not a completely made-up, desperate cope written by someone who claims to have gone to UT, yet seems to have the IQ of a child with their hand caught in the cookie jar. It's not dumb as shit at all. Who would ever say that? But I know what many people have said after reading this. Not me, but others. They've said that Laura seems to have no self-awareness even when writing about supposedly innocent people that she wants to exonerate. Many would wonder why Alejandro decided to masturbate right then with the kids running around the house. Why he didn't lock the door. Why he couldn't just go to the bathroom like a civilized person. Among the million questions about how the legal system works. But in my opinion, the story is written like the world's worst excuses you could give in court as dictated by a 60 IQ moron. The kind of pathetic excuse you would get from someone with severe brain damage, who actually was super guilty, but was trying to explain why you should still give them a job despite them being on the sex offender registry. This is the I was holding the pot for a friend of molestation excuses. The type of lame excuse a kid gives because their brains aren't developed yet. But hey, weird things happen. Surely the next story won't be just as goddamn ridiculous. The next story is about Jamie, or Jaime, a bisexual coach who was hanging with drunk underage kids at a nighttime victory pool party and claims the quarterback cornered him and tried to force him to perform oral sex on him in the pool. That's right, the child tried to force the football coach to do the mouth deed, which would have drowned the coach, but whatever, this is a Laura story. Not a lot's gonna make sense. The coach didn't tell anyone about this alleged attempted mouth rape. He just went home to go have a good think on it. Because that's reasonable? But, the boy told his parents. The boy told his parents he attempted to mouth rape the coach in this story. But again, the evil, gay-hating, white supremacist parents said the coach tried to make the quarterback gay and forced their son to lie and make a false police report, and Jaime was found guilty when the boy lied on the stand. Lied about what? We don't know. We'd love to learn more, but according to Laura, oops, the quarterback committed suicide right before admitting everything. Oh, darn. Why did he have to do that after leaving his evil white supremacist parents and supposedly becoming a healthy, well-adjusted college gay dude? Well, you see, this is what filmmakers and fiction weavers call a deus ex machina when writing fiction. A sudden and unexpected solution to the problem. Like, there should be somebody out there who knows the truth. Starting to see a pattern emerging in Laura's totally real stories, which totally don't shatter easier than her fragile ass ego on the first whiff of scrutiny. It would be cool if she provided any small shred of proof or evidence of any of these claims, but I suspect she's typing on a shit phone. And then we get to Harry's story, which is basically the same. Remember, written in 2020. At this time, Tyro was safely operating as a right-wing autistic queer person on our side of the internet. This is 2 years before he told his story that he just slept with a girl he didn't know was 14 at a party. She just pressed up on him and he didn't know. We will recite Harry's story in full now. Harry is a queer, non-binary person of color, he/him pronouns, who fell prey to a straight white girl with a history of running honey traps on older men. He met the victim through FetLife. Narrator's note, this is a fetish website? A website explicitly for 18+ users only, as she was dating a friend of his. The friend was a 20-something that Harry knew from the local tabletop gaming scene. He struck up a conversation and the two would talk off and on. On FetLife, she listed her age as 18. Harry had no reason to doubt it either.
She looked 18. My friend believed she was 18, and so did others who met her,
relayed Harry.
It seemed a safe thing to take at face value.
She eventually broke up with Harry's friend and expressed an interest in meeting Harry in person. He agreed and picked her up.
I told her that I was not expecting or looking for sex on the first meeting. I'm a gray demisexual, which means I prefer to connect with somebody before being physically intimate.
The girl had other plans, though.
Shortly after we got back, she jumped in my lap and began to grind, then begged for sex. I gave in.
The nightmare for Harry would start a few days later. He got a call from police wanting to talk to him.
She was underage,
he says, choking up at the memory. The girl lied to police not once, but twice. The first time, she claimed nothing ever happened. The second, she said that Harry had physically abused her, including cutting her with a knife.
I've never used a knife during sex, ever,
Harry says. The medical report showed no bruises, cuts, or sign of trauma, proving her account false. As part of trying to make his case, Harry was formally diagnosed by a top state expert. Top men. The expert specialized in testing people for pedophilia and other sexual disorders. He wrote the state-mandated therapy program used in treating sex offenders and created the testing criteria Texas uses to determine if someone's a danger to women and children. Narrator's note, this must be the criteria that said that John Lee Baird has a moderate chance of reoffending. The expert's findings cleared Harry of being a pedophile or sexual predator. His battery of tests found no indicator that Harry was attracted to children. Harry was also cleared of an assortment of other disorders, such as sociopathy and psychopathy. The one diagnosis the expert did find grounds for: autism.
That surprised me,
Harry said.
I'd always thought of myself as socially awkward, but autistic? Once he explained why, a lot of things fell into place.
Harry's autism had caused him to be overly trusting, explaining why he failed to approach the situation with an appropriate level of skepticism. Combine that with the girl's history of using older men for sex, booze, and money. Harry and his friend had been played. In the end, the expert stated flatly that Harry should never be classified as a sex offender or given jail time. He said there would be no benefit for the community doing so.
I think the phrase, putting you on the registry would be utterly pointless, was used,
Harry recalls with a muted chuckle. Another break for Harry came in the months after that report. The girl finally came clean after a third interview about what happened. She confirmed that she lied about her age, had sexual encounters with a number of older men, and had pushed the sexual encounter with Harry despite him being reluctant. She also admitted that her mother had invented the account given in the second interview. Harry's own statement was now fully corroborated. However, this did not matter to prosecutors or her parents. The Brock Turner case was in the headlines during this time. The girl's parents went to the DA and threatened them. Make Harry a registered sex offender, or they would go to the press and accuse the office of being soft on child predators. The DA bent to the pressure. It did not matter what the state expert had said.
that Harry was a neurodivergent, or even what the victim herself said. The DA would not allow a PR scandal to occur. Justice was not the objective. The final plea deal required Harry to be a sex offender for 10 years, but he narrowly avoided prison. Harry has thankfully managed to slowly turn things around and rebuild with the support of friends. He's managed to carve out a small but enduring social circle. Thanks to polygraph results further proving his account correct, Harry has also faced fewer restrictions on travel and other activities. Currently, he has plans to release a book advising others what they can do if they're subjected to the legal system. The system wants to put you in a box, Harry reflected. It wants control of everyone who's part of it. But no matter what rules they impose, your mind is always free. Learn to build worlds in there, and you'll never be a prisoner.
Now, isn't that interesting? The story of a neurodivergent, queer, non-binary, biracial, gray, demisexual gaming enthusiast who was the victim of an evil 14-year-old minx with a history of running honey traps that his friend in his 20s was bringing around. Harry had experts brought in to prove he was not a pedophile. Top men, a battery of tests. Real $6 million man intro type shit. Showed he was totally innocent, and one expert even told him he had autism of all things, and all this was to be blamed on the autism. Something, coincidentally, Tyro, or John Lee Baird, also allegedly claimed. You have to appreciate how this piece takes all accountability from poor Harry, who didn't know no better, 'cause of the tism. Instead blaming the 14-year-old child for being a drunken booze whore who took advantage of older men. But suddenly, the girl comes clean, out of the fucking blue, has a change of conscience, admits she's a jailbait temptress, and most of the charges are dropped, and Harry's given 10 years probation. Wow, aren't those some weird coincidences? Now, of course, I can't confirm that Harry is Tyro. Just that somebody who will later claim to have an intimate knowledge of Tyro and his court case wrote a blog about a very, very similar person with all the same hobbies, the same location, the same racial makeup, mental neurodivergence, autism, telling basically the same story Tyro did at the time with the same penalty and the same excuse. Those evil, white supremacist parents. I'm starting to wonder if mommy and daddy just didn't hug Laura enough as a child. If I could meet Laura Izaguirre, I would ask how much her parents fucking loved white people. To put her under the impression that all parents are involved in a conspiracy on behalf of the white race to jail queers for sex offenses. My parents are white, and they don't love white people that fucking much. Laura, were your parents like escaped Nazis from Argentina or something? Now remember, friends, the story of Harry is very similar, let's say, to the story Tyro was telling before he got busted and his court papers were found. What story do you think he would tell today if he had to amend that story to fit the newly discovered facts and rewrite history as if that never happened? New for 2024, Registered Victims, a 6-piece blog that pillages things Laura wrote in 2020 once again, like a re-release, a grittier, darker version of the original college freshman crap fest she retches out of her fingertips on her blogs. This is something we'll see from Laura Izaguirre a lot. She really has only written like 3 or 4 blogs back in 2020. Everything else she's published for her friends on their blogs have all been rehashes of the same information and references. You'll hear her over and over talk about the Atomwaffen or the Texas Nomads, these white supremacist groups only she fucking knows about. It also makes it very easy to tell when she's writing under a pseudonym. And in this series is what I believe is Laura's edit of the John Lee Baird story. The story as she would like you to believe it today. Rewritten, because now people know what he did. And also because in 2023, under the pseudonym Posey Bindell, I believe Laura wrote a dangerous and libelous piece where she fielded ridiculous defenses of John Lee Baird, and it was made overwhelmingly clear to her that people knew the real story. But we'll get to that. Today, we're just looking into John Lee Baird and Laura Izaguirre's possible version of those events, as written in 2024. Registered Victims, Part 4. Guillermo's Story. Published July 1st, 2024. By Laura Izaguirre. The sex offender registry, promised as a safety tool, is now an anti-trans, anti-queer weapon in the hands of a corrupt legal system. In this series of articles, I will tell the intersectional ethnographies of LGBTQ+ Texans of color who have found themselves trapped. Each of their stories demonstrates a failure of the American system to deliver anything resembling justice and the desperate need for reforms and abolition of prisons and registries.
Make sure to read Part 1, the introduction, Part 2, Jamie's story, and Part 3, Alejandro's story.
Oh, don't worry. We already read those when you first published them 5 years ago. Names have been changed to protect identities and prevent reprisals from law enforcement and vigilantes. Certain identifying facts are also omitted from the stories to protect identities. Information is gathered mainly through written accounts, in-person talks, and phone interviews. She's basically right now explaining away why you shouldn't expect any evidence in anything you're about to hear. Guillermo. Guillermo is a queer, neurodivergent, mixed-race, non-binary, they, he pronouns, residing in Central Texas, Austin. They have given me permission to tell their story in the hope that it will inspire others. In addition to their first-hand account, they have provided extensive documentation, including chat logs, testimonials, and expert reports. Their account is corroborated by several key figures, most of whom choose to remain anonymous for their own safety. Guillermo's story is an intersection of many factors, political and personal. Politically, it shows how America and other parts of the world commit injustice onto the oppressed. Their experience gives us insight into how the rising number of fascists will treat us if they ever come into power. Personally, it demonstrates the outstanding character that is emblematic of those in the trans community. Through their struggle, they clung to a core principle of friendship and loyalty. Guillermo's story begins over a decade ago. A friend, then a 20-year-old Latinx non-binary he/they, had begun to date a white girlfriend, she, her. They met via an 18+ site. She had a profile listing her age as 18. Could it be FetLife? The girl eventually reached out to Guillermo. Chat logs confirmed she initiated the contact. She told Guillermo about many of the places the friend took her. She liked playing Magic the Gathering at Pat's Games and consuming alcohol at parties there. He introduced her to Tefra, a tabletop role-playing game at Dragon's Lair, Austin, where she met many of the developers. She told Guillermo about how they daringly had sex in the game's store bathroom several times. So, just in case you're wondering, FBI, you might want to take a look at this Pat's Games place. The couple attended area conventions such as UshiCon, an 18+ event, Anime Overload, and others. Selfies she took of herself prove attendance. Brandy Hamlet, the chair of UshiCon that year, confirmed the event had checked the IDs of all attendees to verify age.
Only those that were 18+ would have been able to register.
The only way the girl could have gained entry was to have documentation stating she was 18. The current owners of UshiCon confirmed that checking IDs remained standard practice for the event. The girl lived with her parents and they kept a close eye on her movements. To spend time with her boyfriend, she would tell them she was spending time with a trusted friend. That friend would lie on her behalf. The boyfriend would then pick her up from a church near a high school. If they wanted to stay out longer, she'd tell the parents she was having a sleepover. During this period, Guillermo and the girl never met in person. Their friend often brought her to locations on days where they
Guillermo, were busy at work. So the two only communicated online now and then, with them encouraging the pair. They were an adorable couple, Guillermo recalls. Eventually, the girl opened up to Guillermo more. At the age of 12, her father had begun to rape her. Her mother responded by blaming her for it and beating her. This abuse was still ongoing. She'd reported it to Child Protective Services, but they had refused to intervene. The father's straight white cis male privilege had kept him safe. Guillermo and the boyfriend suggested she leave. She argued that would only leave her homeless. This is a fear many can relate to. The thought of having nowhere to go has kept many queer and trans youth from fleeing abusive households. Guillermo and the boyfriend sympathized with her plight, so they made a plan. The boyfriend lived with family, but Guillermo had their own apartment with a spare bedroom. The couple could move in, and the three become roommates. The hope was that this would end the years of abuse and suffering that she had endured. The first step was Guillermo bringing the girl to their apartment. The girl suggested waiting until the end of the year. Her parents would be busy with holiday planning and less attentive. The date was set for December. Wow, just like John Lee Baird. Guillermo picked her up from the church, which clearly represents the school in this story, I assume. Their first time meeting in person. The group played video games and watched anime. Then she was dropped off back home. However, this is when issues began. On the way home, she found out her mom had discovered she wasn't at her friend's house like she'd told them. I was worried for her, since it means she was going home to another beating. However, the greatest harm was coming for Guillermo. They later got a call from the police, and a horrendous shock. She was underage, Guillermo says, choking up at the memory. Just like Harry! Court documents confirm she was 14 while dating Guillermo's friend and attending 18-plus events. When the police called me, I got a lawyer, Guillermo recalls. I knew better than to talk to them on my own. That proved a good move. Never talk to the cops. The lawyer was able to stop the police from calling them repeatedly. The problems continued to mount, though. Guillermo told the boyfriend the revelation about the girl's age. The friend immediately broke contact, blocking them across social media and eventually deleting their profiles. Guillermo's lawyer explained it to them. It was a prisoner's dilemma. In this case, he was now aware he'd been having sex with a minor, a serious crime. The police had contacted me, but not him. He did not know if I was going to turn on him in exchange for a deal, so he cast me off to avoid association. Police arrested Guillermo for the felony of enticing a child. Subsequent questions from the police revealed a disturbing error. It became obvious early on they thought I was her boyfriend, Guillermo recalls. The girl had told them my name, but not his. Court documents confirm the girl only named Guillermo in her 3 interviews. The parents had been suspicious for some time. Her parents knew she was seeing someone, just not who. That she chose to protect him, I can understand. Documents show the girl told the truth in her first interview. Nothing happened apart from anime and video games. The situation put Guillermo in a difficult spot, though. My lawyer laid it out for me. I had a choice to make. I could tell the police about my friend, her boyfriend, and give them everything. Testify against him. Use that to secure a plea deal, or I could keep my mouth shut and not involve him. It was an excruciating decision. I was afraid. Very afraid. This was my first time ever being arrested. I was a leader in several groups and conventions. I had a lot to lose, but at the same time, I knew he had been lied to, same as me. This wasn't a case of catching a predator like with Chris Hansen. Why should I participate in branding him a pedophile over something he didn't know? Was it worth saving myself at the cost of another? Ultimately, Guillermo asked their lawyer not to use the full chat logs. Instead, they shared just her profile in the opening messages to show the girl lied about her age and initiated contact. I hoped the lack of physical evidence would make the district attorney reluctant to pursue charges against me, Guillermo shares. Looking back, I realize what a naive take that was.
Guillermo was indicted on 8 felony charges, including sexual assault of a child. A search warrant was issued, and their phone, computer, and other belongings were seized. But the district attorney prosecuting them hit roadblocks after that. Court documents showed DNA evidence was collected, but nothing found. The medical report came back negative on all counts. No signs of recent bruises, cuts, trauma, or sexual penetration. That flatly contradicted the claims the girl made in the second interview, where she made up a story about Guillermo raping and torturing her. With blades? Like Harry? Prosecutors called in a state expert to evaluate Guillermo, hoping to establish they were dangerous. This expert had, while working for the Department of Criminal Justice, written the official Texas sex offender treatment program. Just like Harry! Wow! The same guy? In these two totally fucking different stories? One where this guy had sex with a child, and the other where he's a totally fucking innocent Jesus-like hero? What are the odds of that? And guess what they found? He remains regarded as one of the top experts nationally for determining someone's risk for being an offender. The result? Guillermo cannot be diagnosed as a pedophile, concluded the expert. Guillermo cannot be classified as a sexual predator. By the metrics used, he found that out of 100 people, 97 would be more likely to abuse children or commit rape than Guillermo. An astonishingly low figure! He concluded that making Guillermo a sex offender would have no benefit to the community. And this was from a stance that began by assuming Guillermo guilty of the crime, a standard practice for evaluators. In a third discussion with prosecutors, the girl recanted her second interview and admitted to lying about her age. She stated the mom had coached her and forced her to accuse Guillermo of doing things to her. The parents ceased cooperating with the DA's office after this, according to the lawyer. The case changed hands several times, with no one wanting it. One of the prosecutors tacitly admitted to the lawyer that they had no case. Ethically, the DA's office should have dismissed the charges at this point, but doing so would be a blot on the record of whoever did. No one was willing to do the right thing if that meant damaging their career. Justice and community never entered their cold colonialist calculus. Meanwhile, Guillermo sat in pretrial limbo with no way out. With no physical evidence, no expert testimony, nor any reliable victim statements, the district attorney settled on one of the few things left: child pornography. Chat logs show the girl had once sent Guillermo explicit photos during their conversations. The logs indicate she did so as a way of thanking them for listening to her. Guillermo asked her not to do that because of her boyfriend. She agreed and did not send any more. Guillermo deleted the photos shortly after without saving them. While the images were deleted from the chat log, they remained on the phone's drive. Deleted files remain written to a phone's internal storage until overwritten by new data. This, of course, I assume was according to Guillermo. I believe he just saved it. Sounds like a really fucking long way around trying to explain he had kiddie porn on his phone. Court documents show that the images were recovered by police when they used data recovery tools that scraped for active and deleted files. This gave the DA digital evidence, albeit flimsy. Not really sure how pictures of the 14-year-old victim naked on your phone is flimsy evidence, but okay. No child pornography was found on Guillermo's computer, which had also been seized and similarly scanned. Their phone contained no other illegal images. None were in the emails or online storage either. This was a far cry from typical child porn cases, where those who distribute and collect it, nearly all straight white cis males. Editor's note:
the majority of those materials come from the country of India, which is famous for their lack of white males. But Laura ignores a lot, so we'll just move on. We'll have thousands of images and many different victims across many devices. Oddly, while the data recovery grabbed the photos, the DA never sought the chat logs Guillermo's lawyer had given them in the initial messages. They knew it existed. Why not seek the entire log to find out more evidence they could use against Guillermo? The lawyer explained it to Guillermo as a legal strategy. The prosecutor already knew from what we gave them that the chat logs would undermine their case. Child pornography possession charges require proving intent and knowledge. The chat logs would counter both of those. Guillermo never asked for the pictures, nor did he know her actual age. By not issuing a warrant for the logs, the prosecutor wouldn't have to present that to a jury, and they didn't know the defense had a complete copy of their own. Omitting exculpatory evidence from a case by simply not asking for it occurs frequently. It's more costly for a defense attorney to issue warrants. Some tech companies, such as Facebook, are notoriously bad about complying with defense requests. That lets the prosecutor control what the jury will see and rig the game in their favor. It's likely why the girl's fake ID from the events she attended was never entered into evidence. The plea deal was offered. Instead of being indicted on child porn possession charges, Guillermo would plead guilty to indecent exposure with 10 years of probation as a sex offender. Wow, just like Baird and Harry. The DA allowed Guillermo to use deferred adjudication, just like Baird, meaning they wouldn't be convicted and would not be regarded as a felon. The other small mercy they granted was agreeing to no prison time, recognizing that Guillermo's neurodivergence would make it a death penalty. Guillermo's commitment to not selling out his friend was once again being tested. If I accepted the deal, the matter would be over, but I'd be branded a sex offender. If we went to trial, I could use the chat logs to mount a good defense, but that would also mean giving the prosecutor the full logs before the trial and exposing my friend to going through what I just had. Guillermo could possibly win the fight, but lose the war. The war to protect his pedophile, statutory rapist friend. I'm sorry, edit that. The odds of winning a trial were also very risky. Guillermo is queer, neurodivergent, BIPOC, and non-binary. Aren't at least two of those the same thing? Being queer made the odds of being heard poor. They were a person of color on top of that, making their chances even worse. Their intersectional identity meant a Texas jury would very likely convict them regardless of the merits. The DA had the photos, could show them from Guillermo's phone, and could prove the girl was underage. Arguing legal nuance before an implicitly biased, anti-queer, anti-brown court was a dangerous move. And if they lost, serious prison time of up to 20 years awaited, which they were unlikely to survive. Guillermo accepted the deal. Sadly, this is not a story with happy endings, nor any justice. The main abusers were the girl's parents, the father who raped her and the mother who beat her. The girl, Guillermo, and the friend were all victims, as were all the others lied to. The true evil was never brought to justice. Only the innocent suffered. The medical exam on the girl had found signs of old bone fractures and trauma consistent with the abuse she'd told Guillermo. Yet there's no record of the girl's parents ever being arrested for abusing her. Police were simply uninterested in actually protecting her. It's likely the parents ceased cooperating with the DA when they became at risk of being investigated themselves. Search results show her last known address was with her parents.
This is Laura dropping the mask a little bit. Laura is telling us here that she hunted down and searched out an underage victim of a sex crime,
Trapped in ongoing abuse with no hope for escape. It is unknown if she's even still alive. While Guillermo received no prison time, an apathetic system gave the girl a life sentence in hell. To date, only Guillermo has experienced any legal hardships for what happened. The boyfriend has remained free, the only victim spared. Guillermo succeeded in containing the damage, but at great personal cost. They pled to a crime they never committed, An innocent person branded with the mark of sex offender. Despite her lies, Guillermo holds no resentment for the girl. I truly believe she was being abused. She did not seek help in the correct way, but she was a child. Whose fault is it that she was so desperate for escape? Who made her seek refuge in the arms of a 20-year-old because her home was so broken? Why did the system abandon her over and over? Guillermo has managed to slowly turn things around and rebuild. After their arrest, they became a founding member of HavenCon, a Texas convention dedicated to being a safe haven for queer geeks nationally. One former staffer wrote, Guillermo was a critical part of HavenCon's early success. They helped with everything, from programming to community outreach. We owe them a huge debt for what they did, more than what's currently acknowledged. I assume because they can't really acknowledge the registered sex offender. A friend gave this statement. Guillermo has a reputation as someone who helped others in need, but is overly trusting. So a lot of us figured out what happened without them needing to say anything. As Guillermo confirms, lots of friends decided to part way with them, but enough stayed. Guillermo has enjoyed support from other organizations and groups in Texas and beyond. They consult for several groups and offer them organizational advice. Once free, Guillermo intends to use the lost decade of their life as a motivator to help others. You can read about those who've been oppressed by the American legal system, Guillermo says resolutely, but experiencing injustice firsthand awakens something deep within. Despite suffering on behalf of their friend, Guillermo has few regrets. A person has a few key moments in their life when their character is on the line. Who they are is revealed by the choices they make. This was one of mine. When it counted, I did not sell out my friend to save my own neck. Regardless of whatever legal issues I have, I can bear it with my dignity still intact. The girl's experience is mirrored by the tragedy of today's trans youths, tens of thousands of whom are trapped in abusive households. Trapped with parents who refuse to provide the gender-affirming care they desperately need to avoid suicide. Yet if they seek external help, those same abusers can brand the very people rescuing these children as pedophiles and rapists, the same way Guillermo was wrongfully labeled. The ability for the LGBTQ+ community to stay loyal to the chosen family of our friends is what will allow us to win versus the hate aligned against us. Guillermo embodies that perfectly. We should all strive to follow his example. Oh, wow. Another Central Texas mixed-race neurodivergent non-binary just like Baird. A magic and tabletop gaming enthusiast just like Harry and Baird. Another story where the girl's evil, fascist, white supremacist parents forced her to lie, just like Harry. And he had a friend in his 20s that brought this underage girl around, just like Harry. Another story that ends in 10 years probation because the child came forward to admit that she was just an evil temptress, just like Harry. But in this story, the 14-year-old is an abused waif and not a diabolical honeypotting temptress who this 20-year-old friend met on another 18+ site, just like Harry. Guillermo also had a battery of tests and experts brought in to prove he wasn't a pedophile, just like Harry. Isn't that weird? Perhaps all the victim blaming prefacing the original article didn't go over well in the original cut, so Laura made some more of those factual edits that we'll learn Laura Izaguirre loves so much. In this version of the story, John Lee Guillermo is a hero. He never touched the girl, which is weird because that contradicts every story he told before. He's a true saint. In fact, such a saint, he sacrificed his own life to protect some guy that he played magic cards with, risking getting raped in prison to get his buddy off of a statutory rape charge. And let's not forget the poor abused teen. No longer an evil honeypotting temptress. Now a poor abused teen whose father was raping her and whose mother was beating her to keep her silent.
Which, the only thing sad about this is that actually happens to some young women. Pretty sure it didn't happen here. Forget that none of this can be verified. No. Guillermo's a fucking hero, yo. This is what you do for your friends, guys. You take the 10-year fall for a child sex offense so they can walk away scot-free. If I'm ever gonna rob a bank or actually commit a crime, I'm taking John Lee Baird with me. He'll take the fall for anyone. You don't alert the police about this so-called ongoing child abuse you just learned about, especially as a teacher trained to do exactly that. No, you don't do that. You don't immediately throw up your hands and say, I never touched her. That dude in his mid-20s that I barely know, that's his fucking underage girlfriend. I had no idea. Book him Dano. No, you don't do that. You conceal the crimes of both the abusive parents, supposedly, and of your friend's statutory rape of this girl. Because surely that's how to help her. This supposedly makes him the good guy? Like we said before, with Alejandro's story, you remember the guy who just forgot to pull up the blanket when he just had to fap with a bunch of kids running around in the house? Even when Laura's trying to make someone out to be the innocent good guy, due to her own twisted, fucked up morality and viewpoints, she inadvertently turns them into the evil villain or a complete dumbass. It's all just innocent mistakes, guys, and heroism, and the power of friendship. This is punky power. Of course, I cannot accuse anyone of trying to rewrite history. But it is my personal belief that both of these stories were about Laura's associate, John Lee Baird. And she changed the story as people found out more about the case. Because when you're telling the truth, the story always changes radically from being taken advantage of and having sex with a 14-year-old against your will to never touching the teen girl and displaying a Jesus Christ-like level of loyalty to your statutory rapist friend because he claims he didn't know his girlfriend was 14 through the extended period of their relationship. And your version of the truth should always depend on how much the public knows. Because according to Laura Izaguirre, apparently, that's how honesty and journalism works. You cannot convince me that a teacher in his mid-30s believed a 14-year-old he was speaking and interacting with for some extended amount of time was of age. I don't care what over 18 sites or event she was seen at. He was not drunk at a bar, and this small girl had a fake ID, and he was too drunk like he claimed to Gilded Pooh. Baird was sober, and he had interacted with this child for a while. Someone you felt comfortable enough to let in your home, to come live there, supposedly. What do I believe happened with John Lee Baird? Well, if you combine the three versions of the story, you can get at least a fuzzy picture, and I think most of you probably have it by now. I believe Baird met some guy in his 20s playing magic cards or whatever in Austin who had a relationship going with a 14-year-old girl. I believe at first the boyfriend did hide this fact, but after getting to know Baird better, it did come out. Learning some dude in his mid-20s had a 14-year-old girlfriend day one would probably be too weird for even Tyro, I think. But remember, Tyro's the type of guy to defend Scooby because he thought Scooby was his friend. He's dumb as dog shit like that. I believe that part of Laura's story. Once Tyro is friends with the guy, then some sob story about her age came out, but she's being abused and her dad rapes her, but her mom beats her and all that. We're really the victims here, Baird. I believe this girl was fucked up and promiscuous, but that is no excuse for adults to take advantage of her. Baird communicated with this child and even received nude photos, which he knew it was a child, so he deleted. And I believe at some point the 14-year-old and the 20-something friend of Baird's split up. Baird then picked her up from school after communicating with her online. And whoever initiated sexual contact doesn't matter because, again, Baird was fucking 34 at the time. I'm willing to bet Baird probably consciously knew what he was doing was wrong, but it had been normalized by his buddy, the 20-something-year-old who'd been getting away with it for months now. Even if she, as a confused-ass 14-year-old trying to play adult advanced on him, it was his responsibility to reject her. She shouldn't have even been in his house. Simple as that. But it couldn't just be because he lacked morals and discipline. No. After all, he's just a guy who admittedly watches 99% anime, argued for lolicon online later, and the same day blogged about the sanctity of tree cum. According to Laura, this girl was into BDSM and anime conventions and shit. It's not hard to make the case that this man was face to face with his little Sailor Moon fantasy. And he took advantage of this fucked up, confused 14-year-old girl. I believe the mother of the child, having learned about the first boyfriend, was fed up with all this bullshit with older men that her troubled teen was doing, found out it was happening again, this time with Baird, and went after his ass. There was no question in the mother's mind what this Jerry Springer troubled teen had been up to due to the last grown man that she caught sleeping with her. I believe, due to the charges that resulted from the exam coming back, and then him being subsequently charged with these genital allegations, that he indeed had some manner of sexual contact with the child. I believe either the child's testimony changed, or the SANE exam became tainted at some point, and Baird had a number of experts brought in to prove that he was an autistic, innocent baby bird who just made a terrible mistake at the behest of this evil, fucked up Jezebel. All of this, or some version of it, resulting in most of the charges getting dropped and dialed down to enticement by exposure on a minor, and him just getting 10 years deferred adjudication. I believe John Lee Baird, otherwise known on the internet as Tyro, is unrepentant, as no rational person would be on the fucking sex offender registry and go to work as a photographer at a princess party company. According to Laura's stories, if they are what I believe them to be, he truly believes he's the victim of all this. He's the victim of him having sex with a child. I believe he has a natural attraction to children, which he now services with a lolicon, as he argued for his Tyro Inchoate on the internet. And I believe that he's still out there somewhere, using all accounts, fucking around on the internet, and using Laura Izaguirre to exact revenge on those meanies on the internet who called him a pedophile. I believe that not only the story of Harry was about John Lee Baird, but also the other two stories as well in that first article. They contain the details that wouldn't fit into Harry's narrative, such as the coach claiming the student was the predator. Very similar to the narrative of poor Guillermo that Laura Izaguirre tried to push. And as we will learn later, I believe Laura Izaguirre knowingly, maliciously, and on behalf of this man, attempted to deceive the Austin, Texas LGBT community into forming a hate mob and rallying around this creep. I will even show where she may have broken the law by attempting to false flag a major terrorist event in service of causing a panic. It's about to get very, very interesting, especially for Laura Izaguirre. You had to know the real story of John Lee Baird, and then see the comparison to what I believe is the ever-changing story about him Laura Izaguirre keeps re-editing and re-releasing as more of the truth leaks out. Not only because Laura's entire beef with me revolves around 10 minutes of me shitting on him on Twitter and on my show, but also so you can see what I believe is her very conscious departures from the truth, and the wild, childish-ass copes she has to make believe are real so she can continue to believe in her own bullshit. This is the man she's going not just to war with me, but with all of you for as well. As she claims you are all pedophiles who are part of a white supremacist gang called Los Tejas, led by this cartoon fellow, and you are so feared that no LGBTQ organization in Texas would speak out about you. Yes, friends, Laura will tell some tall tales in this series. But next time, we're going to focus on her opinions, writings, and steadfast beliefs. Her past on the internet as a left-wing edgelord giving advice on how to commit vandalism and violence on the women she disagrees with, and why she says 97% of people who have experienced sexual assault are lying about it. She also tells us why we should not believe women when it comes to rape. Oh, and just in case Tyro is watching this, wherever you are, keep this in mind. I had forgotten about you 10 minutes after late night, 3 years ago. It is my sincere belief that your friend Laura decided on your behalf to attempt to libel and defame me, my audience, and even attempt to dox and threaten my child. I'm not going to let that go, and now I'm forced to defend myself and my character. And that unfortunately included this video all about you. Laura made it that way. She inevitably has tied you together. And after all, if you blog a bunch of terrible lies about a YouTuber, I think any reasonable person would agree that them making a video defending themselves is the foreseeable response. You can point your filthy, creepy finger right at Laura, the woman next to you in the grocery uniform, blathering on about fragile white male egos and wild delusional revenge plots because she's mad she's never faced any real criticism before. Next time on the Laura Izaguirre Chronicles, things really heat up when we talk about Laura and sex offenders, TERFs, and mass shootings. See you there!
There's a woman by day, they call her Laura. Run to chase her, she's a sushi